Have you ever walked into something ordinary, a lunch, a familiar house, a moment you've lived 100 times before, and sensed that something more was quietly unfolding? I walked into my sister's house at lunchtime. Nothing heavy, nothing serious. Simple lunch meeting with my mom, my two sisters, and me. 4 women across different decades of life. Pizza was being cut in the dining table. My sisters were already there, reaching for plates. There was movement, overlapping voices, the comfort of being together. At first glance, it looked simple, just lunch. But some of the most meaningful moments never announced themselves. Lunch was easy: Luminati's pizza, salad, sparkling water. The kind of meal that doesn't ask for attention. Hands reaching for slices, passing plates. Sitting here, I became aware of how much history can exist beneath something so ordinary. Relationships don't always show their weight on the surface. They carry years quietly. Shared childhoods, familiar laughter, unspoken disappointments, and scars that don't need to be named to be felt. Have you ever been in a room where nothing looks complicated, but you know the relationship itself has depth and also tension? Over the years, our relationships has been shaped by more than time. There were misunderstandings, moments we didn't know how to talk through well, seasons where closeness felt strained, distant, or fragile. There were times of longing to feel understood, to feel connected again, to feel like we were moving toward each other instead of around each other. And maybe that sounds familiar. Relationships aren't messy because we're careless. They're messy because we're human. Because we grow, because we change, because we don't always know how to hold truth and tenderness at the same time. Sometimes love stays, but ease leaves, and that can be confusing. One of my sisters had been visiting from Korea. At first we thought we had a year. A whole year felt generous, plenty of time. But plans changed, and suddenly it became 6 months. Sitting there at lunch, I felt the quiet realization of how fast time moves. How easily we assume we'll get to things later. How often we believe we have more space than we do. Have you ever looked up and realized the season you thought you had was already passing? Time doesn't slow down because we're busy or tired or unsure. It just keeps moving. And sometimes we don't feel that loss until we pause long enough to notice it. My mom sat with us, steady in a way that only years can shape, carrying wisdom, endurance, and the kind of love that has weathered change. My sisters and I sat across from one another, each shaped by different seasons, different responsibilities, different ways we've learned to protect ourselves. As life shifts, relationship shifts too. Children grow, roles change, expectations adjust. And sometimes those changes bring misunderstanding before they bring maturity. There comes a point in some relationships when effort alone feels insufficient. When you've tried explaining, tried adjusting, tried holding everything together, and you begin to wonder if it's worth continuing. But restoration was never meant to be powered by will alone. God doesn't demand that we fix everything. He doesn't rush healing. He meets us in pauses, in ordinary moments, in spaces where we stop striving and simply remain present. What if restoration doesn't mean erasing the past, but allowing God to work gently within it? As we sat there, something quiet happened. The kind of moment you can't plan, you only recognize it after it passes. Someone spoke, and we actually listened. Just eyes meeting, shoulders softening, faces settling into safety of being received. For a few seconds, it felt like we weren't performing closeness. We were practicing it. At the table, I reached across and held a hand. A small touch, simple, unremarkable on its own. Seeing each other's eyes fill with tears. But it carried something bigger than the gesture itself. It felt like the whole table understood, without saying it out loud. We can't fix everything in one lunch, but we can stay, and we can be present. We can choose tenderness. Have you ever experienced that? When a relationship doesn't get solved, but it gets softened? I realized that restoration is not the big event. It's just one step at a time. Relying on God to heal our wounded hearts, forgiving one another, and choosing not to be stuck in the past. And I think that's when God really moves in. And I realized this is love. Sometimes love is staying when other person shares their hurts, and courage to stay with her. I realized I also wounded my mom and my 2 sisters, intentionally, sometimes with mistakes. So I also had to forgive myself. And in that moment of quiet lunch, peace came in. I felt like God was saying, don't take everything so seriously, Julie. Rest in me and just enjoy the moment and love one another. And that's exactly what I did today. If you're standing in a place where loving someone feels complicated, where the history feels heavy, where you're unsure whether to keep going, you don't have to fix everything today. Pause where you are, stay present where you can, and let God hold what you were never meant to carry alone. Even the smallest moments, a shared table, a listening gaze, a room that softens, can become holy ground. And sometimes that's how restoration begins. To be honest with you, there were some fears in my heart. What if I mess up again? What if it's hard to love again? But God never worries for the future, and He tells me not to. So I did my best to be present. Something in me had settled, not because everything was resolved, not because the relationship suddenly became easy, but because I was reminded of this truth. God does not ask us to restore relationships by force. He wants us to lean on Him and learn to forgive and learn to love the best way we can by following Jesus' example. If you have relationships that are complicated, I pray for you that you can bring in small moments, like lunch today, with pizza, salad, and sparkling water. I pray for restoration. Until we meet again, blessings.